Hey guys, we're doing the most hateful and invidious form of YouTube video today. The response video. Everyone hates response videos. But all the time, well, not all the time. We don't even watch YouTube all that often. We don't.
Yeah, but whenever we do, you're like, oh, we should have recorded us watching this.
Yes. Sometimes we watch YouTube and we make catty remarks. And it's like, well, why didn't we just record ourselves making catty remarks and upload that to YouTube? So we started watching this old video from that vegan couple about the perennial debate between anti-natalists and just anti-anti-natalists. I mean, nobody is a pro-natalist. Nobody. Not even those Catholic people who say they are. I mean, okay, you got to be a really sheltered Catholic person. You're like, oh, remember Steve from high school? Yeah, Steve, who became a crackhead? Do you think he should raise kids? Remember Crackhead Steve? Oh, Crackhead, he was a lot of fun. You really think Crackhead Steve should raise kids?
He'll turn his life around.
Yeah, the kids will change him. Yeah. Oh, you'll see. He'll
get his act together once he has a baby.
I mean, unless you're so sheltered that you do not know Crackhead Steve, nobody feels that everyone should have kids. And I mean, like, the more cynical, the more okay, cynical is the wrong word. It depends on the society you live in. And your vantage on that society, like what parts of it you perceive. Like, you know, I've known a couple different people who worked in like social housing.
Yeah.
I've known a couple different people who work with crackheads. You know, those people, they are exposed to so much addict behavior, so much bad behavior, so many of their clients people try to help are chronically unemployed and unemployable. And over time they seem to come to the worldview that like only 10% of humanity should reproduce. You know what I mean? They're like, about 90% of people are not up to this task. And other people are like 50-50 and 60-40. But like ultimately, you only got to make the decision for one person. You got to make the decision for you.
Right.
But so that is not... Normally, there's no point debating it unless Crackhead Steve is your brother. And now, my father had 9 kids. I'd say about 8 of them are Crackhead Steve. No, I'd say of my own brothers and sisters, do I think even one of them should have kids? Do I think I myself should have kids? I mean, you know, it's a struggle. Next couple of years, the question is, can we get settled enough in terms of having an income and having a home and all that stuff? You want to build the nest before you lay eggs in it.
Yeah.
But sure, I would be delighted to have one more kid. I already got one. I would be glad to have one, not 2, not 3. No, that's ridiculous. And you know, now my girlfriend, the great thing, she has the experience of taking care of my daughter. So you know, it's everything you got goes into that one kid. Unless they're spaced out by like 10 years. You got a full 10 years between your 2 kids. You can swing it. Something like that. What?
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, I don't have very much experience working with crackheads, as you said. But, you know, I did work for a psychologist, and he saw clients who were trying to get government disability funds. So a lot of them had children, and it was really sad reading about their stories, because I would type up whatever my boss would dictate to me, typing up reports about the clients. And yeah, it was sad. So many of them had many children with like, you know, different partners,
and they weren't mentally or financially in a position to really raise their own kids. Yeah.
Oh yeah, all of them had mental disorders. It was for this type of disability, because he was a psychologist. But yeah, and I also interviewed at a foster clinic. So like basically they were in charge of transporting children from the foster homes to this location where parents could meet with their children for 1 or 2 hours. And I didn't get the job, you know, but just seeing it as I was in the waiting room, like waiting for the interview, just seeing like some of the reunions was pretty depressing, you know, like
there are people who have those reunions in jail. You know what I mean? Yeah. Anyway. So. Yeah. So
I'm definitely not arguing that everybody should have kids.
So my point in this segment of the video is some people are anti-natalist and some people are merely anti-natalist or neutral. Yeah. And, you know, nobody is pro-natalist. You know, put it this way. If you think you shouldn't have kids, probably you shouldn't. Like, you know, you talk to somebody like Durian Ryder. Durian Ryder is really set in the idea he's never going to have kids. Do you really want to talk him down off that ledge? Do you really want to be the person who convinces Durian Ryder to get someone pregnant or even to adopt? Really? You want to have that on your conscience for the rest of your life? Like, yeah, now we got Durian Ryder Jr. And now we got Durian Ryder doing, self-important videos about how to buy your kid matching outfits and shit. That would be awful. Can you imagine? His channel would take on a whole new direction. Clothes shopping for your 2-year-old with Durian Ryder. I don't.
Bike shopping.
I didn't even think.
When can you first buy a bike for your child?
Right, the 3-wheeled bikes for your preschooler and all that. Yeah, you're right.
Their kid would be biking in diapers.
So, right, this is a fate we're all narrowly avoiding. If you have a crackhead Steve in your life, you don't want to convince him to have kids. And just when I've known people, look, you know what? That's even like my dating life, though. I told you, like, there were other women hitting on me right around the same time Melissa came into my life. And one of them said, well, like she was really interested in me, but she said she didn't think I'd be all that interested in her. And I was like, well, you're probably right. I trust your judgment. And, when I talked to Melissa was completely confident that this was going to work. I was like, well, maybe you know what you're talking about. Let's find out the hard way. Taking other people's opinions seriously is it's one of the key crucial skills of middle age, I'd say, as opposed to like when you're a little kid in the schoolyard, you're just like, no, you don't know what you're talking about. No, like anything people say to you is really easily refuted with that schoolyard mentality. All right, so this is That Vegan Couple, and I don't know, you get to watch us roll our eyes while we listen to their life-changing advice about not having kids.
In September 2014, it was a mutual decision. I'm not going to talk about the reasons of why we had the operation. We'll link the videos here. Go and watch those videos and you will understand more about this whole process and why we chose to go ahead with it. In this video, I want to give the perspective of a woman who is living with a man who has chosen to have a vasectomy. As a wife, a woman who I will never experience being pregnant, I will never experience giving birth, I will never experience raising our own child. And we have zero intention of adopting or fostering. We don't want to raise a child. We are very content with the people that we help online. We have so many young people saying, you're like my online mum and dad. So we feel like...
Oh my God. So all 140 people who watched my last YouTube video, I claim you as my children. That's like the worst delusion of all. And on the other hand, if somebody sent me an email like that, if someone sent me an email saying they felt like I'm their dad, it would just be like, oh my God, that's depressing. There probably are people who feel that way about me, but they keep it bottled up.
Well, we were just looking at some other videos.
Contain those emotions. Just keep them inside. You should be ashamed of yourself if you feel that way.
Well, like,
I'm not your father.
Okay, but you actually offer moral lessons, you know, like in life advice, and you have a lot of different experiences and that you talk about in your channel. Like, I can see people being like, yeah, like, to me, like, but
I'm also self-loathing. I'm also, like, I really don't set myself up to be this moral figure. Whenever people want to get into this kind of pissing contest with me about who's moral and who's immoral, who's better than who, when currently some other YouTubers are trying to do, I always just come out the gate and say, yeah, look, I'm a terrible person. Like, let's start on that basis. Look, I totally own the fact that I'm a terrible person. Now, where's this conversation going to go from here?
Yeah, but I was just thinking, like, in comparison to some of the videos, I don't really watch their channel, but I was just, we were scrolling.
They got mukbangs.
We were scrolling. Yeah, right. You opened a mukbang video, and it was like, okay, so this is, I don't know, is their content really like
look, there are some
helping raise people?
No, there are some people who are in such a low situation in life, who are so depressed that they feel like that's their mom sitting there watching this woman do a mukbang. They feel like that's a paternal relationship. I can understand that, but that's dark, man. If people write to you and say, yeah, watching your mukbang, I feel like and you're going to come on YouTube and boast like, oh, I don't need to have kids because I have my adopted YouTube channel. You should be weeping yourself to sleep at night if you believe that shit. And the people on the other side of the equation should be weeping themselves to sleep at night also. This is tragedy being misrepresented as triumph.
Raising children from a distance via social media, and we're very content with that. So growing up, I was never really keen on the idea of having children. It definitely was expected of me as a woman, but also I have a European background, and getting married, having children is just part of the course. It's what we do. I remember at one stage was thinking, I'd like to experience.
It's just funny that she said that, like, it's a European thing. Like, I think it's just an everywhere thing to get married and have kids. I think there's pressure on women to have kids in, like, every society.
China.
Yeah.
Most of Africa.
At an earlier age
Caribbean.
In China, too. Like, you know, you've mentioned that, like, if you haven't gotten married by the time that you're 30, you're basically an old maid.
Yeah. And the odds are slim for you. That's right. Yeah. Sure. So, sure.
Anyway,
yeah.
I think there are pressures.
I just assumed she was alluding to something we don't know. That's like it's a euphemism. You know, I have a European background, and like people in the audience know what she meant. That's what I assumed.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah, I assume there's something more to that story. I unknown to me. So regular viewers will know what she's hinting at.
Being pregnant, I thought it was quite freaky, like having someone grow inside of your body. It's like a little alien, and I used to think of it as more of an experiment than something that I really innately wanted to do. I didn't have strong maternal instincts, I don't feel, until I was about, I think, 29, 30 years old. And the main reason for that was that we were living in Thailand and we'd spend our weekends volunteering at an orphanage. And this was amazing. This was the first time that we were in real contact with babies, and we loved those kids. We had a ball. They became ours. We were their mum and dad. They were our children.
So this is the number one reason why I'm making this video, to be honest with you. I mean, we can joke around all you want, but I think this is a really serious, sick, sad delusion. And when I saw this video for the first time a couple years ago now, December of 2015, I guess, you know, I sent them an email. I assume it was an email. It's possible it was some other kind of text message, but I think it was an email. And I said, look, you know, you guys need to recognize, you're saying you felt like these were your children. No. You know, just straight up no. You had no responsibility for these kids. You know, they got the photographs here of them playing games with these kids. You didn't, you know, put them to bed at night. That's not your crib. You're not responsible for their education and their lives and so on. You have no sense of responsibility. You're not waking up in the middle of the night with nightmares that your kid is okay, which I had not only when I was with my daughter, but after I was separated from my daughter. You don't have any of the agony, short-term or long-term, of responsibility. And responsibility is a huge part of being a parent. You were a tourist who paid a fee to spend a couple of hours with a kid in an orphanage. You know, but I mean, for you to say on camera that you were their parent and they were your children, well, then you abandoned them, didn't you? So for a couple of days or a couple of weeks, I don't know how long, she doesn't say, you were a part-time babysitter for these kids, and that's it. And if you don't really know and don't really appreciate how deep the difference is between that and being their parent or their being your child, you know, not just in the level of feeling, but the level of everything else, you know, shame on you. I think that's really shameful. I think that's really a dangerous delusion that they're spreading here. And I also want to say, you know, orphanage tourism is itself dangerous. You don't think it's damaging for these kids? So what? They have a different couple of white washed-up hippies make donations to play make-believe foster parent for a couple of weeks and then get on the next airplane to the beach to go swimming? Like, you know, if you felt like they were your kids, you would be haunted by a sense of guilt, you know, after leaving them behind. And I knew one couple who were in that situation, but the kids were fairly grown up. They were looking to adopt two kids who were brother and sister, so they were really involved, and they were doing the paperwork, and they were going to set up. They were going to adopt these two kids in Cambodia. I don't know how old the kids were, but from the whole way it was told to me, it seemed like they were old enough to kind of reason and talk with them. So these were, you know, orphans, but, you know, not tiny little newborns or something. And then the dude out of the couple, he had a motorcycle accident. It was either a motorcycle or one of those four-wheel drive type of things, something like that, and injured his spine. They just left town. They just had to evacuate from Cambodia to England and go get surgery for his spine. And they're scarred for life, you know, and then they never adopted the kids. They never, So they were just in the startup phases, but that was the question, was of responsibility and taking on responsibility for these kids right through to when they go to university or whenever they get their own job and achieve independence, which is normally about 5 years after you graduate university in this century. I mean, it's a long-term commitment. But no, you don't know what it's like. You know, just going to call them that vegan couple. You know, kind of shame on you for saying this. And I think any parent watching this would really cringe. I know the word cringe is overused, but it's cringeworthy to hear someone in her position claim that she knows what it's like to be a parent and that these were her kids and vice versa. You want to weigh in? Hit that play button.
Bond was so strong. I formed a very special bond.
If the bond was so strong, why did you leave? Like, that is bullshit to me. If you said the bond was so strong that you stayed for 5 years, I'd be like, okay, I respect that. The bond was so strong, it meant so much to me until I got my next airplane ticket and went to the beach and carried on my permanent vacation lifestyle. The bond was so strong, and then I went skiing and forget it. Like, what are you talking about? So you spent a couple of weeks with these kids. You kept these photos and forgot about where are they today? You know, like, the bond was so strong that you really enjoyed those 2 weeks. And then, you know, it's sick. She believes this, and she's encouraging others to have this kind of delusion. You know, no, you didn't have a strong bond. Again, when I was separated from my daughter, believe me, I woke up with, I can't even call them nightmares. You'd wake up in the middle of the night with this pure evolutionary instinct of, where is my daughter? Is my daughter okay? You know, like, it's not even a nightmare. You're not dreaming. It's an instinct as pure and raw as if you walk into a dark room and there's a snake coiled in the corner hissing at you. You know, so you may not have had an experience of that, but if you have, it's not even fear, but you have this instinct that fills in your mind. There's a snake in the corner of the room. You know, it leaps out at you. Your whole mind, you know, becomes very clear and bright. You got millions of years of evolution behind you for that kind of reaction. There are moments like that where you feel instinct without any of the intermediate layers of cognition and imagination and reason where, you know, your mind reacts. Sure, I wake up in the middle of the night, you know, where is my daughter? Is my daughter okay? It's awful. That's what it's like being bonded to a child. You know, it's because for the first year of my daughter's life, I was with her 24/7. I didn't even have a job. I was a full-time stay-at-home parent, and hold her and cradle her and rock her and feed her and, you know, wipe her bum and all this stuff you do. I don't know if you did any of that with these kids, but fundamentally, I mean, there's a creche in the background there. There's a cot. There's a baby's, you know, crib. You didn't buy that crib. You didn't assemble that crib. You didn't sit there next to that crib reading a book while the kid was sleeping. You know, I don't think you even cooked the food and any of this stuff, you know, because it's a fully functioning orphanage. And I don't think you even knew 1% of what it means to be a parent.
With 2 children, a boy and a girl, and the girl in particular, very, very strong connection. We just loved each other, and that was the only time in my...
Where is she now? Just love each other, but you didn't adopt her. You didn't ever go back. You didn't. What do you think? Does she send you email now? Because you're so into being an internet parent, a social media parent. You can't. She's on the edge of crying. It's sad. It's sad, but the self-deception makes it worse.
In my life that I actually thought, yeah, I definitely want to be a mother. I want to have children. I wanted to adopt this girl. We looked into adoption, and from that point, we were definitely thinking of starting a family. We continued with the idea of wanting to have a family for some years, and we were preparing for that kind of mentally. We weren't vegan for that time at the orphanage, and we didn't know a lot of things about the reasons why we would ultimately choose not to have children at that stage. So it was very interesting going from that feeling, and that was very, very strong. Don't get me wrong. I mean, oh my gosh, like my heart was breaking and I really wanted a baby. I wanted to experience breastfeeding. I just thought it was all wonderful. So to go from that to having decided not to have children was quite a journey, quite a process. And again, all the details are in the other videos that we've linked. What was interesting is the last time we came together sexually before the operation was really, really emotional for me. I was kind of thinking like, oh my God, this is it. This is my last chance of ever being a mother. And I remember thinking, oh, well, if the condom breaks and I happen to fall pregnant, oh, that's just the universe giving us a sign. We were meant to have a baby and that'll just be it. Well, of course, that was never going to happen, and it obviously didn't happen. But I was actually quite...
Hashtag condoms.
emotional. I did cry that night. It was just like this, the finality of it sunk in. And yes, of course, you can freeze your sperm for later on, and you can also have the operation reversed. But we knew that once we made this decision, we didn't want to do either of those options later on. So it was very much a final, this is it, this is happening. Now, post vasectomy operation, completely different feeling. I felt like 1,000 tons of pressure and weight were lifted from my shoulders once he got the snip. It just felt so right and so 100% in the decision, and I've never ever looked back. In fact, I actually found like there was more, I don't want to call it doubt, but kind of going over the pros and cons more before the operation. And once the operation happened, I was like 100%, this is perfect, spot on. I feel so good about this. I've never even thought about it twice with any doubt, any hesitation. I'm so happy that we decided this. So I think it actually became easier once the operation...
But I noticed there's no consideration for the orphan or the orphans, plural, that you were so wanted to. I mean, you're claiming they were your kids. You could have a vasectomy and still adopt those kids, or just move in next to the orphanage and see them regularly. You could just be a regular member of the support staff at that orphanage or something to be a part of their lives that way. You don't even have to adopt them. You could just make it a point to go there 3 days a week, teach the kid English or whatever. I don't know, because you don't speak Thai. You guys don't speak Thai or Cambodian or any other language. It's not like you're inspired enough to sit down and hit the books and learn a language that I taught myself while fucking chopping firewood and doing humanitarian work in villages with no electricity, blah fucking blah blah. I didn't, Yeah, but these guys obviously have the wealth and the leisure to live this way, both on permanent vacation and to go and do the volunteer work. So you probably had the wealth and leisure to make a positive impact in those kids' lives, even if you're just an English-speaking shithead who can't get your act together to learn the language that those kids speak. But I want to cast shade on that, because you're not volunteering in an orphanage in New York City where the kids would speak English. You're not volunteering in an orphanage in, London, England. This is Thailand. What possible? And you guys are not trained educators. They're not qualified to be teachers. They're not qualified to do childcare work, which, as you know, has very definite credentials attached to it. And you never made the effort to learn the language. So fuck you, you self-entitled Dharma tourist. What makes you think you can take care of these kids? At a minimum, they should be taken care of by someone who speaks the same language they do. When you were 2 years old, how good were you at coping with a complete stranger speaking a foreign language as your primary caregiver? And then them cutting out when they want to get back on their vacation schedule, go swimming or whatever the situation is. Sorry, it's dark. It's dark. It's funny, too. I don't even see the vasectomy itself, as an operation this way, because it's really easy to manage pregnancy within a monogamous relationship. I don't really see a vasectomy at the point being to prevent your husband from getting you pregnant. I think with the vasectomy, then you're confident your husband isn't going to get some other bitch pregnant. Because, there are so many ways. With two people in a regular relationship, it's really not hard to manage pregnancy and lack thereof, And by the way, my dad had 9 kids, and then he had a vasectomy. So we know. We know he didn't get another bitch pregnant after that. He maxed out at 9.
Operation was just done with then beforehand, because you've kind of got a foot in both worlds, like should we, shouldn't we, yes, no. Once it's done, and then it's just easy. And I know a lot of women are saying, but what about our natural instincts, our maternal instincts? It's natural to have a baby, to be a mother. And that's 100% right, and I'm not disagreeing with that. But we have created a very unnatural world, so following our natural instincts does not always match up or marry up with the artificial, crazy world.
Yeah, I agree with this. And I think that is a good reason to not have kids, because it's really, trying to raise a child in today's world is totally different than how you would in a tribal society, You would have more help in a tribal society. You would have just more time with your child. Most women, most parents want to get back to work and they don't have as much time with their children as they would in the past. Like, just a biological, like, instinct level, like what we could do.
I think, I think there is no natural society. I think in each culture and each society,
yeah, I know,
different people would have to make that choice for different reasons if they get to make the choice. Mm-hmm. But, I think in a lot of societies, women didn't even have that choice.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a lot of traditional societies, women didn't even choose who they married. It was arranged by their parents or what have you. But yeah, if we're talking about being able to make a choice, sure, different cultures and different levels of technology dictate, different choices. But for most of human history, in terms of the first pregnancy, with women, it's like a 50% chance you're going to die. Mm-hmm. And so second pregnancy and third were much safer normally. If you survived your first pregnancy, then you're likely to survive a second and third. But it was pretty much flip the coin. Mm-hmm. So for most of our history, a life and death decision, for the mother, let alone for the fate of the child thereafter.
True that.
World that we've created. Yes, ideally, in a perfect ideal world, Luca and I would have very much enjoyed having our own children and raising them.
Whoa. So I actually wasn't expecting to go there. For me, that's a plot twist.
Yeah.
I didn't think she'd blame the world for why they don't have kids. See, I don't see it that way at all. I think it's a judgment call about who you are.
I didn't watch the other video that she mentioned, but she said that she didn't know they weren't vegan at the time that they were at this orphanage, and they didn't know the reasons for going vegan. And I assume they think it must be like knowing about ecological damage and the future of our planet environment, future of. But
look, to me, that's. I mean, look. So I got a cousin who's a gambling addict. Compulsive gambler. For him to make the decision not to have kids, okay, pretty straightforward. Mm-hmm. But it's about who he is. It's about what he's capable of, etc. To make the decision on the basis of what the world is, I don't know if I can get behind that. I think I think you've got it the wrong way around. I just don't think that's the way to think about the problem.
Well, I think it goes back to what you were talking about in your discussion with Ask Yourself. Like you're okay with putting yourself, raising a child in Compton or whatever. Like a lot of people would say that they're not. A lot lot of people are just. They see doom on the horizon.
Look, regardless of whether it's, Compton or Berkeley, California, or London or Cambodia or Thailand, wherever you're living, having a child is 100% your responsibility. So it's 100% your fault or, your glory or whatever if you do it right. I just see that as 100% on you. If you can't cope with life in Thailand, you can't cope. A lot of people can't. So don't have a kid. If you can't cope with life in Compton or if you have to live in, I just don't see that as a decision. I just don't see this something you can pin on the world or pin on the city you happen to be living in. Whether it's Compton or Chiang Mai. I just see that being an example of a decision that has to be 100% on you. A lot of people shouldn't drive a car. They have bad vision. They have attention deficit disorder. I knew a guy who had a nervous disorder of the nervous system, where he had these peculiar twitches. And I'd been in the car with him driving. Oh. He was a member of the Green Party. Yeah, and I was like, all right, okay, you got a driver's license this way. It was amazing. And his whole face would seize up, and sometimes his hands seize up. You go, wow, okay. Periodically, he'd twitch out this way. I'm like, all right. I think a lot of people should voluntarily choose not to drive a car. Mm. But I wouldn't really pin that on the world. Different places you live, different circumstances, different, traffic is better or worse, or the roads are safer. But you've got to make that decision based on who you are. I think that's kind of 100%.
Absolutely, yeah.
Your own responsibility.
Right.
The world notwithstanding.
Yeah.
But look, millions of people in Thailand are having babies. Millions of people in Compton are having babies. Mm. None of these places are a war zone. And of course, what you see is even in a war zone, as long as you're a few kilometers back from where the live fire is, people still make the decision to have babies.
It's just not a scenario that we see as feasible in the world that we have collectively created. So I have found that maternal instinct very much died down well before we decided to have the vasectomy. And
I still got to say, that little girl in the orphanage, So you decided the world gone wrong. You decided the world's gone to shit. So fuck that kid. So that kid doesn't need your help. Like, this actually is kind of incoherent to me in a pretty profound level. Again, if you decided because it was who you are, if you decided that you are not a positive influence for that, you wouldn't be a good parent. Yeah, my cousin, he's a compulsive gambler. Okay, whatever. Maybe he's got other good qualities. Maybe not. But, if you make that decision, then obviously that means both you wouldn't adopt or whatever. But you're fronting on this idea that you were this kid's parent, that you had this really deep connection, et cetera, et cetera. And then it just seems to be disposable for these pretty evanescent reasons.
And it hasn't come back. I'm now 35 and almost a half years old. So I'm entering my 36th year, and I feel completely fine with this decision. I don't have any regrets at all. And I'm also really glad that...
Well, I'll just say, if what she's saying is true, it may be bullshit. But if it's true... So there's a little girl who was deeply bonded with you and who thought you were going to adopt her and become your mom. Do you think she's left with regrets for the rest of her life? There was a wealthy white couple who did long-distance cycling who were going to adopt her and who suddenly decided she doesn't matter. It's fucked up. My biological daughter, you have this weird situation. She is my biological daughter, but because the court dates have been so spread out, because the French court system has been such a disaster, and because of my ex-wife's incredibly immoral misconduct within that legal system, we've had periods of time where my daughter has no memory of who I am, where she meets me like a complete stranger. So what, you want me to say I have no regrets? I think that's something even my daughter would regret, at least hypothetically. You think this kid has no regrets? I don't know. You think the rest of the people at the orphanage have no regrets? Or own up to it and admit that what you were doing at that orphanage was just bullshit Dharma tourism. It was no more meaningful than claiming you used to be a Buddhist monk because you spent 2 weeks in a Buddhist monastery on a Dharma tourism program. There are some monasteries where 2 weeks would feel like a long time. There are some, but that's not what the white tourists do. They just do this kind of bullshit. But to me, there's either you kind of own up to your bullshit on one side of it, or you recognize the tragedy on the other side of it. So those kids are now still they're still at that orphanage, but they're all 5 years older, I guess. You had your personal growth, and you say you've got no regrets. What about them?
Act on those maternal instincts that I was feeling back when I was 29 and 30 years old, because they passed. So in the heat of the moment, yes, it was 100% so powerful and strong, and I really wanted to have a baby. But that passed.
So it's cool. She's being honest. She's being real, and I appreciate that. Yeah. But, I don't think the question of whether or not my cousin should have kids is about his feelings. I don't think that's the question. I think it's about his capability. I think it's about what he has to offer, right? Now, back when I was a single male teaching myself Laotian, chopping firewood and boiling lentils and learning Pali and doing research and humanitarian work, back when I was doing that, why would I not have gone to an orphanage and done this kind of volunteer work? Because I didn't think I had anything to offer. That's a different judgment entirely. It's not about my feelings. You know what I mean? And again, once you offer that, if you really do have a meaningful connection with these kids, if you do find you have something positive to offer, now what? Now you're in a position of, there's that big word with the letter R again, responsibility, an abdication of responsibility. If you take on that responsibility and it means something, and you're not a piece of shit, you're not a crackhead, you really have something to offer. Well, what then? What does that mean? Anyway, I have read a lot of reports, by the way, evaluating some of these Christian charities in Thailand that have tourists fly in, and the tourists very often are drug addicts who've just gone through rehab. They've gone through a Christian rehab, and then they fly over to Thailand and do, volunteer work with these orphans, and most of the time they're not even orphans. It's another weird aspect of it. They have living parents who've dropped them off there for various reasons, and the parents still come and visit too. So things get complex quick. But, and they're people who don't have any education in caregiving or being, kindergarten teachers. They don't have any preparation for doing that. They don't have any of the language skills necessary. They don't understand anything about the culture. So, how would you have felt, even if you take the racial element out of it? So what if you were a kid who was an orphan in the United States or Canada, and you were just being taken care of by Russian tourists who showed up only speaking Russian. You had no common language. Who flew in for 2 weeks and then flew out as one stop on their cross-country tour, so they could have these deep emotional feelings with you and then move on. I'm not going to say it's exploiting the kids, but I mean, obviously, it is a way that those orphanages raise money, is by bringing these people in and soliciting donations, sometimes requiring donations from them for this work. That's what the Christians were doing too. It's a way of reaching out to people's most basic instincts and getting money out of their wallet to support your organization. I think it takes a lot for an organization to refuse to do that in those circumstances, to say, no, the role of educator is not something that can be done by a tourist. No, you're not qualified to play with these kids on the floor just because you donated money to us, to say, no, we're a professional organization and we're not going to do that. It's a very hard thing to say if you're in Cambodia or Laos, or in this case, Thailand. Thailand's not that poor. Thailand's really not a third world country. They don't really have the excuse, but they got a lot of orphans in Thailand. They got a lot of mothers who abandoned their kids in Thailand. Because again, I was in the humanitarian sector, and I read about it, and I talked to other people working in the sector, and I talked to a lot of people who had that experience there. And again, most of the quote-unquote orphans in Thailand are not orphans.
I discovered new information that would shape my life forever. So I'm really, really grateful that we didn't act in the moment and respond to those innate feelings. And I do want to mention that a few years ago, when we were seriously considering starting a family, a friend of ours, a mother of about a 7 or 8 year old son, she was also married, confided in us that she really wasn't happy with how her life turned out. She loved her son, but basically she said to us that if she could turn back time and make the decision again, she would not have fallen pregnant. So she told us how hard it was, how many challenges there were, and it was just a very realistic view to this romantic idea that's sold about raising children. And that was a real wake-up call, because from the outside they looked like this happy, beautiful, perfect family, but inside she was still crying. Like, the kid was like, say, 7 or 8 years old, and she was still having moments of breaking down, and this is hard, and I didn't...
Look, so I've seen mostly, far left-wing feminists talk about this issue of romanticization of pregnancy and childbirth as opposed to the reality, or what you ought to think if you agree with this person ideologically. So I'm a nihilist. I openly describe myself as an historical nihilist. And my nihilistic perspective on this is, as soon as we are adults, when you are an adult, you take responsibility for your own ideology. Doesn't matter that your parents raised you Catholic. It's your choice now. You're responsible for what your religion is. You're responsible for your beliefs. Doesn't matter that you grew up with a romanticized notion of car ownership. That was a huge thing, 1950s, 60s, even 70s. A lot of people grew up with romanticized... Guess what the reality of cars is? Guess what? You got a romanticized notion. Now you've got to deprogram yourself. You've got to figure out what the reality is in so many ways, in terms of its financial cost, the ecological impacts. There are just a lot of reasons to be disillusioned with car ownership.
Social impacts too, just how cities are structured.
And
I come from the Motor City. I mean,
right.
It's very obvious that
it was built for cars, not for people, right? As opposed to Venice.
The differences in culture in a city where you can walk around to get one place to the other versus where you drive everywhere. And
whenever I was hanging out with my professors at UVic, it just was, even in Saskatchewan, it was hilarious to me that these people, their lives revolved around parking meters. About parking being this huge source of stress and so on. Yeah. So, okay, you grew up with a romanticized view of car ownership. Is that going to be your excuse till you're 65 years old? You're an adult now. What is romantic and what is not is up to you. Your parents may have told you that dandelions were poisonous. You're an adult now. You know better. You can make dandelion tea. You can make dandelion wine. You can grow a whole garden full of dandelions if you want to. You can
eat dandelion greens.
You can make dandelion coffee. That's right. You can make all these things out of dandelions. You can farm dandelions in your fucking backyard if you want to. Whether it is a weed or a vegetable is up to you to decide. Your parents' ideology is not yours. Society's ideology is not yours. It is nobody's responsibility but yours. And yeah, you may have really grown up with. I mean, to some extent, I sympathize. Like all childhood misconceptions. You may have grown up with romanticized notions about having kids, but it's on you. It's 100% your responsibility to outgrow that, to make those decisions and have nobody to blame, nobody to thank but yourself.
Was going to be like this, and it was just a reality check. So when people ask us, well, what if you regret the decision to not have children? We always think of this woman, and what if you regret the decision that you have had children? Then what? So I just wanted to give this different perspective.
I just say that the thing with orphanages and adoption puts it into a surreal contrast. Do you think that kid regrets that she doesn't have parents? Do you think that kid, the kid's going to look back and wonder, if only I was cuter, if only somehow I snuggled up to these people more, if only somehow I'd managed to convince them to take me into their lives and take responsibility for me, instead of being a ward of the state, I would have grown up with all the advantages of these shitheads teaching me how to ride a bike and make a vegan salad or whatever, whatever they got to teach. I don't know their background. I mean, maybe they got a lot to share, but obviously, it's an interesting way to look at it. Well, okay, you're parents with no children, but you claim you had a parental relationship with this whole classroom full of kids, and those are now all kids with no parents. So I don't think your regrets are the only ones to be considered here, if you're making that claim.
On the topic. If you have any questions, ladies, please post them down below. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.
So that got dark quick.
Yeah.
Any closing thoughts from you? You went through a period of your life when you thought you'd never want to have kids. No, I don't know. Was that like 10 years long or something? Something like that. No, maybe less. 8 years or something like that.
No, I mean, I expected it. I can relate to quite a lot that you mentioned. It's expected of you. Yeah. So I was with my ex-boyfriend for over 6 years, and his family was really urging me to think about getting married and have kids. My parents were, expecting that I would hold off on that until I had my career figured out, and I agreed with them. I wasn't itching to have a kid and start a family. But also it was just the relationship that I was in, and I expected that I would be in that relationship for the rest of my life.
Yep.
That really did influence how I viewed it. And it was clear pretty soon into the relationship that I didn't feel like I didn't want to have a kid with him because just what he was into.
Yeah.
And I didn't think he would change. I didn't think he would really, get his act together. If we did have a kid. So,
but look, I just want to say, for some reason that always shocked people when I said that. They just never thought of it. When people ask me, do you want to have kids? Obviously, before I had a kid, I would just say it depends on the woman I'm with.
Yeah.
Because, when I was with my blonde ex-girlfriend, we were together for years. We might as well have been married. It was that kind of close, long-term relationship. But with her, I would have never had kids. I think she would have been a terrible parent and...
Yeah.
etc. It was just no. So if I stayed with her forever, then that would have been never having kids, basically. Mm-hmm. See, adopting is kind of a different question. I mean, I never got into that. I mean, maybe it would have been possible to adopt with her if a bunch of other circumstances were right. But no, I would have never had kids with her. But then some other woman, some other circumstance, some other deal, sure, then, I would, So... obviously, it's easy for me to relate to that for a lot of women. That's going to be the same. You're looking at the family unit you're creating. And in our culture in this day and age, the family unit is pretty much just two people. Mm-hmm. It's very rare to meet people who are even in a group of four raising kids. It happens, but it's rare. And that's, I think, ultimately because of the nature of job security and job insecurity. Yeah. The way people have to move around for whatever gig they can get, Absolutely. So on and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, obviously I'm not...
But no, I mean, for quite a few years there, because I expected to be in this relationship forever, I did feel kind of... I don't know. I guess I just felt kind of... I had mixed feelings about it. I was ambivalent because... like I had expected it was expected of me to have a family, and I planned to. At the time, I was trying to plan a career so that I could have kids and afford to have kids, because it was clear that I would be like the main breadwinner. So I was like, it was at this point where I was trying to decide if I should go into a certain career, mostly for the money, to have this responsibility, mostly on my end, So, there was a certain part that was like, a part of me that was like relieved that I didn't have to be worried about that. And I'm sure, I don't really know why that vegan couple didn't have kids, but... You just listened to their explanation and you still don't know why, but okay, right, go on. You just heard them explain why they didn't have kids. Yeah, so, I don't know if they felt like they couldn't afford it, but, I looked.
No, evidently not. That's not the reason at all. Sorry, they're wealthy enough to live this permanent vacation lifestyle, and I'm happy for them. I kind of wish they do something more positive with their wealth and leisure, but this is what they do. No,
yeah, but
money's not the issue.
I was realistic because I was with somebody that didn't have college education. It was clear he would never have college education. Yeah. So that really limits how much you can earn, and what kind of positions you can have in the future. So for me, I was like thinking that this would be something that the responsibility would fall on me. So anyway, but I also was, you build up, like you said, you have a romanticized view, or you build up like what kind of life you're gonna want, and I did think, I'm a responsible person. I think I would be a good parent. So like there was a certain part of that. Oh yeah, and like when I would talk to my mom about it, she was like no, like you're the type of person that needs to have kids because like you're functional, like you're like,
But look, to stick with the car crash analogy, the fact that you can drive a car doesn't mean you should or you ought to drive a car. Like I agree, like look, not everyone's capable of driving a car, not everyone's capable of being a good parent, but the fact that you are capable doesn't mean that's the right decision for you. But
yeah. So
like I say, I'm merely anti-natalist. I'm not pro-natalist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in some ways it was easy to accept. Also, like I did not grow up babysitting. Like I was the youngest in my family. I didn't have any family members that had young children. So like it was kind of easy for me to accept that I wouldn't be a parent. But like there was still, kind of wondering, like and then what it could be like, and anyway, so I think part of that was why I used to peruse the child-free subreddit, because it's a group of people who don't have kids. Yeah. But I did not
happy they're not having kids.
Yeah, it's filled with a lot of awful posts, but some of them are useful, and some of them I could relate to. But I think it probably had to do with like feeling having mixed feelings about it, and like wanting reassurance that this was the right decision that I made, because everything else around me was saying like, no, you should have kids, like, and anyway.
And then she fell in love with me, and now she wants to have kids.
Well, yeah.
My blonde ex-girlfriend, I think she was really in denial about where she stood in those issues. She really did, I think, want to have my baby, especially after an early, like 6 months into the relationship or something, But early on, she said no, she would never have kids. Like she had decided she was never going to have kids. And, the final, like, tragicomic moment when we had already decided to break up, because there were airplane tickets involved. So it was like, okay, so like 2 months from now, you'll go back on this airplane kind of thing. And she had a job. So it was like, okay, so you're going to finish teaching. She was teaching English. And so when her job ends, she'd go back to Canada and this kind of thing. And she was taking those pregnancy vitamins, those prenatal vitamins during, our last 2 months together or whatever it was. I forget exactly. Maybe it was our last 3 weeks together. I forget. But it was, the date was on the calendar. The airplane ticket had been purchased. We knew we were going to break up. And, she said in this remarkably childish voice, oh, yeah, I'm taking these vitamins because, you never know. It's like, and I just said to her straight, I said, look, I don't know what you're thinking or what you're fantasizing here. And maybe you haven't really thought it through yourself. But if you get pregnant now at a stage in the relationship where we both know we're going to break up and where there's no doubt in my mind I never want to have a child with you, that would just be a tragedy for the both of us and for the child. Yeah. Now this is almost a verbatim quote, and you know me. I'm very good at remaining calm when the woman in my life is losing her temper or is upset. It's like, I didn't say it in a mean or angry way. I really was speaking to her. And she immediately just fell to the ground weeping. She just burst into tears. We were at home, by the way. It's not like we were at a shopping mall or something when this conversation happened. I think through the whole relationship, she was in a state of cognitive dissonance, overused term or something. I think she was really in denial about the extent to which she wanted to have a baby. She specifically wanted to have my baby because she really thought of me as a good person and as someone with a lot of redeeming quality in my DNA, which, in a lot of ways I feel I'm not living up to my genetic potential, to be quite honest. In a lot of ways I'm a genetic underachiever. But, I think that really was something she wanted and maybe didn't want to admit to herself, that was what she wanted, even when she had already decided she would break up with me.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I can relate. But it wasn't the first 6 months. It was the first 2 weeks that I met you that I was like,
yeah.
I want to have your baby now.
She had a really cute baby crazy period. It would have been more fun. Well, and if you'd gotten pregnant, you'd have a baby right about now. We're coming up on our 9-month anniversary. So if you just stuck with the program, we could be going back to Canada with you having a big belly, and you'd be in your final trimester now. Go back and give birth in a Canadian hospital.
Yeah, we live in poverty probably for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, but that's another fear people have. Why is living in poverty so scary? Because me and my ex-wife, when we made the decision to have a kid, we had our short-term financial situation together. We are both university educated. She had a PhD, and I had my glorious BA. In reality, my ex-wife had just destroyed all of my career and education plans, right at that time. So all of my career plans had just been canceled, which meant I was available for raising a child. She just destroyed everything I was working on, everything I was planning to do with the rest of my life. But be that as it may, you had this opportunity to do it. But for sure, I think we were realistic. And it's like, well, yeah, we have enough money for the next couple of years. But sure, we can end up living in poverty. Again, both her and I have done research. She was an anthropologist, and I'm more of a political and historical person. But I have lived in poverty. I've lived around people in poverty. I've studied poverty, even from an economic perspective, studied the reality of what is poverty. And, it's a fear, but you can get over it. And I think for a lot of people, it's a choice, whether it's a risk of poverty, because look, my ex-wife has a PhD, but she could be unemployed for the rest of her life. Still entirely possible. She's got a lifetime of unemployment or underemployment ahead of her. It doesn't guarantee her a job. But you can look in that situation and say, okay, we can have a kid and live in poverty. And we could not have a kid and live in poverty anyway, but maybe this is a risk worth taking. But obviously, poverty carries stigma, but does it really carry with it danger? Is that really something we should be afraid of? In
America, if you don't have medical insurance, if you can't afford medical insurance,
but you can meet those.
Get medication.
But you can meet those people, and you can live with them, and you can see their struggle and see how they raise kids. Because I did in Cambodia. In Cambodia, you want to tell me about bad healthcare? The poorest people in America have better healthcare than the richest people in Cambodia. You know what I mean? And they do it, and you see them do it. I'm sorry, but those are not insuperable barriers. Those are superable barriers. They're problems. They're struggles. I was
just trying to think of what could be dangerous.
But you can see. I think if you have that experience and live with those people, you can overcome those fears. You can get comfortable with the reality of what poverty means, especially when you're talking about moderate poverty. Because it wasn't like my ex-wife and I were signing up to go work on a rice farm in Cambodia, which is also something I've visited and studied and know about. I know about the reality of what that would be like. And millions of those people raise their kids. And they're happy, and the kids grow up happy, and in a lot of ways they're less neurotic than people living in the suburbs of Los Angeles, apparently. Yeah. But look, on the level of fear, I think fear and pure instinct is one of the most neglected topics in modern philosophy. I can remember a time when I was really afraid to be bitten by a leech. Now, in Sri Lanka, there are a lot of leeches, a lot of land leeches. There used to be in Laos. Then we cut down all the jungles. There are not really many leeches in Laos anymore. So I knew living in these places and doing humanitarian work and going to Buddhist temples. A lot of Buddhist temples are in the last little piece of jungle. Buddhist temples seem to prevent deforestation. I knew I was going to be exposed to leeches. And there was a time when I felt a very natural fear. Again, this is millions of years of evolution. It wasn't psychological, you know what I mean? It's not like, it doesn't come out of a childhood trauma or neurosis. Nothing. It's a pure, instinctual evolutionary fear. And then, when I had the experience of leeches biting me, for several times and so on, it's really no big deal. It is really no big deal. And, I guess I could give a counterexample. I remember I had no fear at all of being stung by wasps when I was in Laos. And all the other Lao people, remember, were terrified of this. And I allowed myself to be stung on the hand by one of these tropical jungle wasps. And then I found out why they were terrified. Because those wasps in the jungles of Laos are about 10,000 times more venomous than an American wasp, by the way. My whole hand, more than doubled in thickness, my hand. And yeah. So it was really something. Getting bit by that wasp was memorable. And by the way, another fascinating thing with the wasp, if they bite you on the scalp, sting you on the scalp, it permanently discolors your hair. So there are a lot of people in Laos who have like a circle of blonde hair, and the rest of the hair is jet black, caused by the wasp venom. So yeah. And it's either permanent or lasts decades. But you saw that because it was pretty common to get stung. But yeah, because they get trapped in your hair. These fear. And a lot of times what we're talking about here is fear of the unknown. You don't know what it's like to be bitten by a leech. A leech bites you on the ankle. And you take the time and you roll the leech off your skin. You don't even kill them, by the way. I was a practicing Buddhist at the time. I wouldn't kill the leech. Without killing it, I'd roll it off my skin and put it on a leaf and keep going. It's not that big a deal. And I don't know. Poverty may be scary to you in a lot of ways. But in terms of, what matters to me in my life, my sense of dignity and my sense of code of ethics and so on, there are a lot of situations in which I'd choose poverty over money, especially if the money I feel is in any way unethical or violates my code. I don't want to lie to people to get rich. I don't want to hurt people to get rich, or even to just get out of poverty. I'd take poverty with my own strange sense of dignity, and I'd pass that on to my kid. I'd say, guess what, kid? You're living in poverty, because I wouldn't lie, cheat, steal, rob, and plunder. Mm-hmm. So you get to be one of those people.
Yeah, that just shows that in so many ways you'd be a good father. So you are a good father.
Well, and she's right.
You are able to talk with Alexandra.
Right.
Alexandra.
This is the advantage. Is she's really seen me parenting. She knows exactly what I'm like as a father. Mm-hmm. So yeah. So at this point, it's not hypothetical anymore whether or not I'd be a good father. But obviously, anyone watching this video, of course, there were huge challenges for both of us just in terms of earning a living, and we're gonna have the joy of going through that together. But in this simple sense, I don't think your personal poverty is a really compelling reason not to have children. Mm-hmm. And, again, I really do kind of despise Canadian culture, by which I mean white, English-speaking Canadian culture. I grew up very dissatisfied with that culture and that society. And, for that reason, it was an intentional decision that my daughter does not have a Canadian passport. She has both a French passport and an American passport. And I cut it off there. Because I know how terrible the Canadian education system is and so on and so forth. And, I don't know, when my daughter grows up, if there's some reason why she'd want to live in Canada rather than France and the United States, I can imagine, regretting that decision. I can imagine some circumstances. If Donald Trump actually nukes, I don't know, if the United States descends into civil war, or France also could descend into civil war, who knows? But, I could imagine something like that. But with that being said, even those choices, you don't like where you're living, you can move. You don't like living the way you're living, you can change, You gotta even take responsibility for that. Of course, there's a sense in which I can never take responsibility for Canadian culture or British Empire culture. It's like when I was talking about genocide before. There's no way you can take responsibility. But still, you take responsibility for your place in it. And you say, well, even though the society I grow up in it's a bad culture in these various ways, or I personally disagree with the culture in these various ways, I'm going to do my part to raise this child with my culture, with my antidote to those problems in the culture. Yes. I grew up in a culture where nobody cares about reading books or history or what have you. Whereas by contrast, like a place like South Korea, I told you that's what South Korea is a very appealing culture to me in a lot of ways. In some ways, South Koreans are... In some ways, it's unpleasant. I'm not going to get into that here. But, South Korean culture, I looked at that and said, wow, here's a culture where people really read books and really care about politics and history. But I can raise my child sensitive to these things, You're not gonna go out and cut down all the thorny bushes. You're going to educate your child as to what is and isn't a thorn, so they're not going to step on a thorn. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're not going to cover the mountain with leather. You're going to take a small piece of leather and make a shoe, make a shoe out of it so that you can walk over the whole mountain. Mm-hmm. It's a non-vegan image that comes from medieval Buddhism. It's mentioned, but it is a standard logic puzzle where you say, look, the solution to the problem isn't to cover the whole road with leather or cover the whole mountain with leather. It's just enough. And in that same way, to arm your child with just enough information and detachment and insight. And,
Yeah, I'm not saying, I have a lot of experience with this, and I'm a young person, but in the limited experience, I'm just talking about my personal history with it, with this topic. After I started dating you, I was like, I don't know, whatever. I feel
dating.
Weird. I feel weird
after she moved in.
After I flew to China to meet you.
Well, there was a bit of a gap. You started staying in my apartment, and then there was the point where you set up your own closet and hung your clothes. I think that was when it was really committed, right? No, you're like, okay, I'm gonna, I think that's fair to say. Anyway, when you were first dating me, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. And I had this desire to have a kid with you. Like, I had never had that at all. And, I was just thinking about it from this video. She was talking about a maternal instinct. I'm not saying it's maternal instinct, but like, that urge to have a child, like I had never felt that before. And that really did change my perspective on things. So, and I'm not saying this will apply to other people, but like you said, like you shouldn't, if you have this desire to have a child, and it's, if you're not a crackhead, if you're not a gambling addict, then, you should take that seriously too. You should take like natural desire seriously too.
Look, I met so many people in Laos, people who really grew up in poverty, who really wanted to own a car and imagined their lives would be so much better. I remember reading in a newspaper an interview. It was in The Economist, actually, an interview with some people in India, and it was so pathetic how they really believed their lives would be so much better if they only owned a car. And these are even people who owned motorcycles, but who had never owned a car, and this was their big aspiration in life. And, the article was talking about this aspect of culture. It's like, well, you don't know what you're missing. Like, I know you imagine this. Mm-hmm. And even, you met Lao people who really felt their lives would be so much better if only they could ride a train, which is also really, because at that time, Laos didn't have any trains in the whole country. They couldn't imagine what it was like living in a society like Japan, where every day you haul your ass on and off of the same train. Like, most people living in Japan are spending more than an hour a day on that kind of public transport, and it's not a joy and a delight anymore. You know what I mean? Yeah. The novelty wears off quickly. Mm-hmm. So, I do think we need to be very skeptical about that. When you're talking about a desire to have something you've never had, when you're talking about a desire that's fundamentally rooted in ignorance and wishful thinking, I think that's always dangerous. Desire to have a car, or desire to have a child, or what have you. But
no, that's the thing. I don't think it is rooted in ignorance for me, because I've really looked into it. Like, I've made like lists many times, like the pros and cons, and it's something I had thought about extensively.
When you're talking about a given person in the abstract, and you talk about them feeling like they want to have a kid or not feeling like they want to have a kid, I just think it's really worth asking. Okay, so empirically, what's that based on? Mm-hmm. And some people, you mentioned this before, your ex-boyfriend, he basically raised his own younger brother, right? Yeah. He had a younger brother, like 6 years younger than him.
He had two younger siblings,
but they were much younger. So he.
One was like a year younger than him, and then the other one was 4 years younger.
Okay, anyway. So I don't need to know, but okay, all right. So I was off there. But all right, there are some people where they really do have a very definite sense of what raising kids would be like because of their own family, because of their professional work, something like that. Sure. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying as a general warning, I think you need to be more than cautious when you're talking about desire, where the object of that desire is something that may be unknown or unknowable to you, even if it's something as simple as riding the train to work, or what it's going to mean to you to have kids and raise kids. And for sure, I've known all kinds of people who feel like, we talked about this the other day, their lives are so occupied by taking care of the kid that they never get to be who they really are, And maybe I would feel differently about having a kid if I hadn't already done everything in my life I wanted to do. I've said this to you before. I've already been everywhere I ever wanted to go. Like I have no desire to ever travel in South America or Africa. I have no desire even to travel again in Cambodia. Cambodia's nothing in terms of everything, in terms of philosophy and all the things I wanted to learn. I already learned them. So sure, I was definitely at a point in my life where I would never feel resentment against my child that my child was depriving me of the opportunity to do what I really wanted to do. And for a lot of people, it's the exact opposite, right?
Yeah.
Where their kid, they feel, has cut them off from all their ambitions or what they could have been or what have you.
Yeah.
Yep. Your father could have been a dentist. For example.
Oh, no, that was many years ago.
Okay, right. He doesn't, well, all right. It's not too late. No, he can still go back to dental college. Sorry, bit of an inside joke there. All right. Okay, is that a wrap?
I guess, yeah.
Having kids, if you think you shouldn't do it, you probably shouldn't.